Rotarians and honored guests, it's a pleasure to welcome back Steve Griessel, CEO of Betz Family Winery, to our club for a most timely conversation about the multi-dimensional impact of having to make and live with tough decisions in light of the persistent wildfires throughout our region over the last several years. Betz Family Winery's first vintage was in 1997, with just 150 cases made in a warehouse district in Woodinville, with help from volunteer friends. Under Steve's leadership, the winery has grown substantially, earning many awards, especially for their exceptional Cabernet Sauvignon. This past June, Betz Family Winery announced that it would not be releasing a 2020 vintage due to the smoke taint caused by last year's wildfires. It also announced that its sister winery in Oregon, Sunu Wines, would also not be releasing a 2020 vintage either. It was an absolutely brutal decision, Steve shared. In the end, their commitment to quality is paramount and something that cannot be compromised. Without further ado, Steve Griessel, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much, David. I'm just trying to find my, just share it. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Perfect, worked, wonderful. Well, David, thank you very much, and it's such an honor to be speaking to the Seattle Rotary Club again today. The last time I spoke, we talked about the winery and our own story, but this is as David pointed out, this is a very different topic today, and the idea of this is really to share with you, possible things that you may face in your own life and sort of how to go about them. I'm not saying this is wrong or right. I'm just talking about how we went about this and I guess the implications. Oh no, why that? For some reason, this is not letting me move.
Steve, why don't you go ahead and stop share, and I'll share slides for you.
Okay.
And then you just let me know when to advance.
Yeah, it was working. I was testing it. There we go. I'll
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So if you could just move, yeah. So
okay.
Sort of the background is that, David said we were founded by Bob and Kathy Betz in '97. We make small batch wines. We like to think of ourselves as a small giant in the sense of, quality trumps everything. And the part of that is that, we never cut corners. We're always pushing the envelope like our fellow winemakers. And critically, and you'll see why this plays into it, we want to be ambassadors for Washington as a core part of our DNA. We purchased the winery from Bob and Kathy in 2011, and the way we kept Bob on for all these years is that we agreed what the DNA of the company was. We actually documented, and we promised Bob and Kathy that we'd never mess with the DNA. And of course, for most of you that don't know, Bob is a very famous winemaker, and he's a master of wine, and there's less than 300 of those masters of wine in the world. And the thing about us is we agonize, over every decision in the vineyards, and every barrel of wine, and do everything double blind to ensure that we have zero compromise on quality. So that just gives you a little bit of background in terms, for those of you that don't know who we are. And so we've been very lucky over the years to receive very, very high scores for our wines because of that. So if you could just go to the next slide, please. So 2020 comes along. And, we're cruising along, things are looking really good. And of course, all of us know what happened next. I mean, suddenly COVID strikes and literally overnight, 35% of our business just evaporates. It stops. I mean, all the restaurants, as we all know, shut down. Our fellow restaurant owners, all the people we know, the servers, the somms, everybody is out on the street, and we are faced with an unbelievable situation. And we had to pivot. I mean, I think, 2020 will be the year of the pivot. And, just like everybody else, into high-end retail, Zoom tastings, drive-through pickups, digital marketing, and all sorts of things. And we actually were cruising along and thought, okay, we're going to get through this year. We're going to survive the year. But during in late August, as we all know, there were tremendous fires along the West Coast, a lot in Napa Valley, Oregon and in Eastern Washington. Some of the biggest ones actually were in California, and the smoke from California more than anything else moved right throughout, the West. And some days the visibility was so bad that, workers were sent home. And the problem with smoke taint is that it's a completely new science. We really know very little about it, and UC Davis and Wazoo are working on it together with all of us. There's lots of money going into it, but we didn't know much about this, so we decided, to be fair to our growers, that we would pick, since we had no data on whether we had smoke taint or not. You just move the next slide. Thank you. So the problem was, so we wanted to get a test at ETS, is the big lab in Napa Valley, the only accredited one. They had 8,000 samples ahead of us. And so that meant we could only get results 8 weeks later. But so during, after fermentation, which takes a couple of months, our sensory analysis confirmed with Bob and Louis Skinner, our winemaker, that our wines were affected. And we even brought in fellow winemaker friends, who we know very well, to do blind tastings with us, to confirm what we saw. The results came out, and from ETS, and it was like, we have a problem, and of course a massive one at that. Next slide, please. So this is the problem that we were faced with, is we knew we had to be true to our DNA and our loyal customers. We have such rabid fans. People know our wines. They collect our wines. They're their wines as much as our wines. And the problem with this is that we knew any announcement that we made would be a double-edged sword. And so we, of course, also investigated every possible mitigation method. You can imagine, we spoke to all the experts, to people who were doing reverse osmosis and using enzymes, and we looked at all these things, and they were just not going to work for us. And so we decided, we spoke to Bob and of course and we decided to face the brutal reality. And next slide, please. So what was our action plan? The bottom line is we had to decide we could not bottle any of the wine, like at all. Not make a second one. I mean, it just, how could we as a company go out there and put wine out there that was flawed? And, and I think I've given you the background to our DNA. So we spoke to every grower personally and let them know that we had a problem. We had to develop a survival plan, because remember, this is a long-term thing. It doesn't just happen. When something like this goes wrong, it's a 3-year problem, because you've now, in effect, have got 2 years worth of inventory and 3 years that you've got to get through. So we developed that, and my wife was an absolute superstar in working with the team to do that. We, of course, got hold of our bank and told them, and they were so pleased that we were being proactive, and we, of course, shared our 3-year plan with them, and they, were just incredibly supportive. We also then decided we had to let our customers know, because our challenge was that if we didn't let the customers know, and we only let them know in the future, that if this ever, came out, that it would almost look like we were reacting to that versus us being proactive and taking it on the chin in terms of our DNA. So this was all driven by the fact that we had the DNA. And so what did we do? We sent an email to our customers and we told them. And, I can tell you, when we did that, I mean, it does say on the next slide as well, I mean, the response we got from our customers was just absolutely incredible. But what really helped us make this decision was knowing our DNA and looking at that and taking this tough decision despite the consequences, because there's significant consequences to this, right? In the sense of, I mean, millions of dollars of lost revenue, 3 years of just total brutal, just the next 3 years are going to be hell from that perspective. And, the implications of us making this announcement. So next slide, please. Oops. Okay. I think we must have, just go back. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to say about this before we just go to the final slide is that is what we did. But I can tell you that we had very mixed results when it came to the growers and the rest of the industry. And that was very tough, and we knew that was going to occur because, just so you know, I mean, I'm the immediate past chair of the Washington Wine Commission, which is our marketing body. I live and breathe Washington, and even though our customers were very happy, you can imagine that the growers and other winemakers felt like, because we're Betz and we're such a well-known winery, that we had in effect killed the entire vintage. And that was just such a brutal thing for us to face. And that made the decision to go public on this so much harder, I can tell you. And, when we did, of course, this didn't just go to our customers. It also went, all over the news. My wife, Bridget, suddenly had TV crews, in her face and asking all sorts of tough questions, which is quite rightly, so. And so I think the big picture of this is that we've lost a bunch of friends through this. And these are people that, we live with every day. We're a very small community. I don't blame them for feeling the way they do, and I certainly don't judge them in any way. And we need to mend those fences. We certainly, it's going to be up to each winery, because every winery and all the different vineyards are going to be in a completely different situation when it comes to this. But we still go back to looking at this concept that, if you know your DNA, you know who you are, you know what your principles are, you know what the decision is. So even though it was an easy decision because of that, it's still, brutally hard. And we really hope that, that people will understand this over time. And we'll get through this. The other thing that's quite interesting is a big lesson. I think all of us in business worry about too much inventory, but I can tell you that is a much better problem to have than having no inventory. Because once you have no inventory, there's no way to really recover from it. So that's I'll leave it at that in terms of the story I wanted to share today with regard to the winery, the 2020 vintage, and why we made the call and how we utilized our DNA in order to do that. The last thing, by the way, just so one of the things that our purpose has really got nothing to do with wine, and we talk about pushing the envelope, living your purpose and helping others to do the same. And that's the way that we live as a family and as a winery, and how we connect into the community. So just even tougher, because we really do want to reach out to fellow wineries, help them to do the same, share secrets all the time, and the broader community where, as a wine community, we all raise a ton of money all the time, for incredibly good causes, as you know, in the Seattle area, Eastern Washington, and around the country. So I know there's going to be questions, so I look forward to that. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share our story with you today.
Thank you, Steve. Caroline, maybe will you take that down? We can, there you go. Okay. All right. So we've got a few questions, and I have a whole list of questions too, because I'm geeking out over here. We'll start with, how does this affect other winemakers and the wine reputation? Did it raise questions on the year overall for all wines?
Yeah, and that's, I think, what I was really getting at is yes. So the answer is that unfortunately it has. I think some of the media sort of made those types of statements. Certainly the Washington Wine Commission got absolutely inundated with calls about exactly that. And it's been very difficult, because we've had to talk to a lot of wineries about that, because yes, I think that it has had the impact on maybe a question mark around the 2020 vintage. But that does not mean, and I will tell you that the science of this, it does not mean that other wineries have anywhere close to the same problem that we had. It just doesn't. I mean, smoke taint, you can have smoke taint in a certain part of a vineyard, and in other parts, it just doesn't exist. I mean, and it's that difficult to understand at this point in time, and it's a completely new science.
So this is not a thing that has blanketed all of Eastern Washington?
Well, no, I mean, I would say, look, there was smoke. So we had no fires, like adjacent fires. Like, for instance, if you go to Napa, I mean, they had fires raging through vineyards, through wineries, through homesteads, right? And that was just devastating. What we had in Eastern Washington is smoke, and and different levels of smoke, and smoke from different sources. So, for instance, depending on what's burning, the smoke will have different characteristics. Things, by the way, that I'd never even thought about until I started listening to the academics. And so that's why it's a hit and miss situation in terms of the impact that it has on different vineyards. Different varieties, by the way, are more susceptible than others. We're learning all this as we speak, because we're seeing the results of that in our winery and other wineries, and through the scientific research of Wazoo and UC Davis.
Okay. Explain, if you will, the double-blind process that you mentioned.
Yeah, so Bob, being a master of wine, he does everything double-blind. What double-blind means is that when we taste barrels, or we taste blends, we do not know the source of where that blend comes from, and we also do not know what's in the blend, in the sense of how much. Let's say if we're doing our Cabernet, our Pierre de Famille, how much Cabernet, where it comes from, versus Merlot versus Petit Verdot. So we keep that completely. So that's why it's double blind. And we keep that completely hidden in order to ensure that when we tasting, and we do 5 wines per flight, and then we select the best wine of that day, that becomes control. And then we make wines for the next flight, the next day, around that control wine. And we do that for 3 months until we select the final wine of every one of our wines that we do. And we swore to Bob that we would never change that, and we will never change that. It's just something that we do as a winery. So it's to absolutely ensure that the highest quality possible without getting, let's say, bent out of shape, or when you think, hang on, if this is from Red Mountain, from this vineyard, it's got to be better than that one. So it's a completely objective way of tasting wine.
Yeah, good. In your business planning, had you considered any risk that you might miss a full production cycle? What would you suggest to other business owners for their risk analysis?
There was no business plan, I mean, that we had ever contemplated that would do this, would even figure this out. I mean, it's the implications are just huge, number one. Number two, we assumed that there would be insurance. There's no insurance. So, I mean, we would have been, and that's another massive problem. And so I think that in itself is something that we are, talking about as an industry, because without insurance, that's going to put us all in a very difficult situation. In California, I mean, I think you've seen the insurance premiums have gone up by 5x, and the cover has gone down by 50%. So California is having to step in. I mean, to do that. They have much bigger issues than we do in Washington and Oregon, I can tell you. And that's why there's a flight of winemakers into Oregon and into Washington for that reason. But it's a hard one. I think if there was insurance, and at least we could recover, certain of our cost and some of our profit, it would still be brutal, but it would be more palatable. But the fact that there's no insurance is a very difficult thing. So yeah, I think we should all plan, for the worst case scenario. But damn, I mean, to live, with that sort of stuff hanging over your head, I think, I don't know, I think I don't want to live like that, as a human being. I think we got to, plan for the worst and hope for the best, I guess.
Are you the only winery that did this?
Yes. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, we are the only winery, which makes us a little bit of a unicorn when it comes to this, which makes it even more I think, unpalatable with, to fellow wineries. And, of course, our customers really get it. They understand. They're going, hey, we've collected your wines. We know that you would never do this. But yeah, at this point in time, that's true. That's correct.
Speaking of your customers, though, and I promise to go back to member questions, but I'm just curious. Let me pull on this for a second. You already have a lot of competition from the state, from Oregon, basically the whole West Coast, you and thousands of other wineries. Do you worry as a business that you're taking this act, right, which is good? Are you worried that you may lose or will not, your customers won't come back?
So that's an excellent question. We have to keep engaged with our customers and engage even more than we ever have. So we plan to, for instance, we're going to have to release library wines. We're going to have to do more experiences. We've just decided for the first time to actually be open to the public for by appointment only experiences. I think for most of you that know this, we've always been completely closed to the public. So yes, we've done a completely new e-commerce site. So we are doing a ton of things and investing in things to make sure that we keep our customers engaged, and we engage with our customers so that they don't forget about us. Because if we just sit there and nothing happens, they will make different choices, even though they sort of say a sad goodbye. So what you're saying is a great point.
No, I get it, because you've got loyalty, but loyalty only goes so far. So I like that answer, because you've got to keep people engaged. So I better hang on to this cork for as long as I can. I hear a South African accent, which I'm intrigued by, as I was a Rotary exchange student in South Africa many years ago. If you did winemaking in South Africa, what lessons learned from tough experiences there helped you with the tough situation, the decision that you're going through today?
Yeah, so that is correct. My wife and I are originally from South Africa, very proud first-generation Americans. We do have a very small joint venture in South Africa doing old vine Chenin Blanc, but I did not learn winemaking in South Africa. I learned how to drink wine in South Africa at all the incredible wineries, and I met a lot of fantastic characters, young and old winemakers, and that's how I fell in love with wine. But no, I think I had my black belt in drinking wine at that point in time, but not, and I always paid attention to it. But all our winemaking has been learned through Bob and through through Wazoo.
Yeah. Okay. How strong was the smoky flavor? Could it be an acquired? I was wondering about the same thing. Could it be an acquired taste like Manskell's or some whiskeys, or was it truly offensive flavor?
So it varies. Depending on lots. Some of it is literally slightly smoky, and some, particularly if in a Syrah, people might go, man, that's really cool. It's actually quite nice. All the way through to when you've got very high loads, of these compounds in the wine, it really starts getting pretty acrid and nasty. So honestly, I think. There's a bunch of the wines that I think, a lot of people say, like, why would you not release that wine? For exactly that reason, right? I mean, depending on where it is on the spectrum, that's the question. But we just feel that there's just no way we could ever do it. The other thing is, once you put it in a bottle, it might be tasting, like X, but who knows what it'll be tasting like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, because people collect our wines for many, many years. So that gives you a sense of the range.
Yeah. You mentioned that you lost friends. Did you also get new friends with your business model?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say that yes, we've gained a ton of friends over this. And it's just been sad. And as I say, I truly do not blame people, because people that we are very close to, there's some of them that were pretty upset about it, just because of the implications for the entire vintage. It had nothing to do with our decision. I mean, everybody, feels very bad for us that we are faced with this. But it's a double-edged sword, and I really think time will heal these things, and when we all look back at this, we'll be fine, because I think the relationships are so critical, in the entire industry. And I think in life in general. I mean, that's, the one thing that we have found, Bridget and I, is that the people that we have met through wine over our lifetime, and in Washington State, this winery has made the experience of owning this winery like more worthwhile than anything we could ever imagine, to be honest.
Yeah, I should never personally have left the industry. Stupidest decision of my world, but I'm off. We've had smoke the last couple of consecutive years. I'm curious if this is becoming the norm. And if it becomes the norm, you may not be the only winery that does this. And if it becomes the norm, I mean, this could be a real domino effect. Yes, no, am I crazy to think that?
Well, I think there's no question that, we're having some very, very hot summers, some hot days. We've got, California, has got big issues. You've got, we don't do forest management like we used to do. So we don't do controlled burning. But at the same time, so that's called on the negative side. On the positive side, I can tell you that the industry, UC Davis, the states, Wazoo, everybody is working at a rapid pace to understand the science of this, how to mitigate it, and there's lots of exciting ideas in that. So I really believe we will overcome this, but yeah, will it be, I guess if it's happened, we've had smoke taint once, and, will it happen again? Probably, but I think it's hopefully going to be few and far between, certainly, if we've seen what's happened over all the years.
I think you need to build a wall. Steve, thank you for sticking to your principles. It is admirable. How does the smoke taint get into the juice? Through the skin, through the ground? Is there a way to mitigate it now that it is identified?
Yeah, so it literally gets onto through the skins. It permeates the skins of the grapes, and then gets into the actual, into the epidermis itself, and then through into the juice. It also can be on the leaves and that, but that's really not going to have an impact at all, on the wine. It doesn't really go into the ground, so that in other words, so you have a lasting impact where, the following year, somehow those molecules will come through the vine into the grapes. It truly is, think about the way, smoke would impact us as a human. If there was smoke, we would be struggling to breathe, and it would, get into our lungs. It's exactly the same as what's going on with a grape, with an actual berry, yeah.
Here's a fan mail. I love what you did. In previous years, when there were weather issues that affected crops, didn't it become part of the educated wine community's responsibility to know about the year's issues and highlights?
Yes, and so because that's the great thing about wine, right? Is every vintage is different. So when you make whiskey or you make beer, you're making it according to a formula. If you make a bad batch of beer, you throw it out, and off you go, and 2 weeks later you've got beer. In wine, you get one shot a year, and that's why every vintage is so fun, because Mother Nature is dealing you cards, and you as humans have to react to that, okay, and work with Mother Nature. You can't fight Mother Nature, and so yeah, and so because of that, every vintage is different. Like 11 was a very cool vintage, whereas 12 is a very warm vintage, as an example, right? Luckily, in Eastern Washington, we have a lot of very, very good vintages, and sometimes many in a row. But yeah, and we always talk to once again, if we've had a cool vintage, we will tell people, look, it's a cooler vintage. The wines are going to be, not as big and bold as warmer vintage, but they have finesse. They have lower alcohols. There's a lot to be said for wines like that as well.
Yeah. The smoke in California must have been worse. How are the California wineries dealing with the smoke issue?
Well, the Napa Valley people specifically, have been really devastated, in the sense that many wineries burned down. Vineyards actually, there were fires going through them. And yeah, if you look at the crop, from last year, it's down. The Cabernet crop is down 50%, which is mind blowing. I mean, just think about that. And remember, that doesn't mean it's 50% for each winery. There could be tons of wineries where it's 100% and somebody else, was able to get a crop. So it's devastating. I mean, it really, and I think we all saw those fires, like the glass fire and the other fires that went through there. We've got tons of friends there. So it's been very, very tough on them, but it really does look like California is stepping up, to assist these wineries and come up with a state-sponsored insurance program, etc. But they are also going to have to deal, just because of the way Napa works and the forest close to there, and the let's call it the fuel that now lives under the, within those trees. They're going to have to deal with it in a different way.
Yeah. I guess you have a choice to answer this next question or not. How much revenue did you lose last year?
Yeah, it's we can't. It's millions. I mean, it's not. It's a big number. And please don't feel sorry for us. It just is what it is. I mean, any of us running our business could be faced with this. And thank God we have the ability. We're smart enough, out of this adversity, we've come up with a great business plan. We have to execute on it. The banks, the bank has stepped up. I mean, so we'll get through it, but it wasn't insignificant, I can tell you.
So for fire nerds on the call today, our very own Chief Scargins, the chief of fire for Seattle, has put in the chat a link if you want to go see where the fires are and how they affect the people around them. That's awesome. What did you do with all the grapes that were not used?
Well, we made, by the nature, and so we made wine from everything, because we had no idea whether it was going to be tainted or not. So everything is in barrel. And so we just got to figure out, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with, the wine, et cetera? Because very soon, because the next vintage is coming up, we've got to move that wine somewhere. And, we'll probably have to sell it for cents in the dollar, on the bulk market. And of course, be absolutely brutally honest about what it is, the ETS labs, so that people can see what they're buying. But, I wish there was something else that we could do, like turn it into, I don't know, into a cocktail, turn it into, I mean, we've thought about a gazillion things, a sauce, that might be quite fun, but at this point in time, we're going to be discarding it on some basis.
That is sad. What did you do? Oh, I just asked that question. Keep up, Ken. Can you speak to the workforce in the wine industry here? Will they be retained? Any big shifts in industry here, given these climate change issues? Employees are super valuable.
Yeah, so we did. Yeah, I still think the wine industry in general is a great place for people to be employed. We are growing as an industry. We've got a lot of fantastic workers, both on, as in the Woodinville area, there's like 130 wineries, and then on, of course, in Eastern Washington, our vineyard workers are just absolutely incredible, and very, very important to us. Mechanization will continue to occur with, let's say, the bigger wineries, just because they have to mechanize, to keep costs down and where they're going. But certainly for the smaller wineries like ourselves, hand-picking everything, touching the vineyard multiple times during a season is what we do. That's how we produce the wonderful wines we do. So, yes, our people, our personnel, our teams are critical to us, and they will continue to thrive going forward, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Are you involved in this weekend's auction of Washington wines in spite of your personal decisions?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Out of the winery, I mean, we're a small winery. We've raised over $1 million, for the various charities, including the auction of Washington wine since we bought the winery 10 years ago. So we love doing that. And, I mean, the auction of Washington wine is something very near and dear to our heart. And, it has a huge impact on Seattle Children's Hospital and unfunded, care for kids that are really, really sick and other things. So, of course, absolutely. We deeply involved, and I'm still on the board of, as the past chair, I'm still on the board of the, of the Washington Wine Commission, which is directly connected to the auction of Washington wines.
Can I share a funny story real quick that I've never shared with anybody? I went to that many years ago when I was in the industry, and there was the really big crowd, and Kenny G was playing. Kenny G comes up to me and he goes, "I hear that you know how to play the piano. I'm without a pianist. Would you like to come up on stage and join me?" Oddly enough, I said no. I'm like, I don't think I know your music that well. That's all I can remember. Have you thought, you touched on this a second ago, have you thought about diversifying into other product lines, like potentially distilled beverages?
Yeah, we always, when you're in this industry, you always thinking about, okay, like for instance, we've launched this whole new brand called Sunu, which is, our single site Pinot Noirs, within the Willamette Valley as an example. But we've looked at, should we get into the beer business? Should we get into the whiskey business, etc.? And we've talked, because we know everybody. So we've talked to people about that. Right now, our view is we need to really stick to the wine business and stick to the very high-end wine business and do that in both Washington and Oregon. I mean, we see both areas, they don't really compete with each other because Oregon is such a different climate and we think makes some of the best Pinot Noirs in the world. And now Chardonnay is coming in as well. And then, in Washington, which is much hotter, we've got, the big reds, the Cabs and the Syrahs and those types of wines. So that's where our heads are at. But yes, absolutely. We've certainly walked down those paths because I think you have to, have an open mind when you, in any business like this, when you're in the adult beverage business as such.
Adult beverage business. Steve, thank you so much. Awesome backstory. Sorry you had to go through all that. Very interesting to learn about the pivoting that it is the word of last year. Very, very interesting. So good luck and Godspeed in the future.
Now, of course, and I hope to see all of you. Please, if you ever like to come and do a tasting at our winery, it's very easy. I mean, BetzFamilyWinery.com and book it. We do these really high-end private tastings by appointment only, and it's an experience I promise you won't have at any other winery. We do things very differently, and so we'd love to see you. We're in Woodinville, just down the road from. Probably some of you live very, very close to us, so you are our friends and neighbors. And thank you for your continued support, and also thanks to all of you for the incredible work you do as Rotarians.
Very good, thank you. Quick shout out to our two big gold sponsors. Welcome aboard Liz Powell with Remax on Market and Bob Alexander. You want to get involved, get hold of Caroline. With sponsorships like this, we are able to watch and rerun and share conversations like Steve's today on our very own YouTube channel.